What would you do if the beast you saved turned out to be the one man the world demanded dead? For Serayan, a lone Omega hidden deep in the heart of the winter forest, a single act of mercy became an act of betrayal. She had taken in a dying wolf during the blizzard, his fur black as midnight, streaked with blood, his breaths faint as ghosts in the storm. For 3 days, fragile peace lingered inside her cabin, as she nursed the stranger back from the edge of death. But on the 3rd morning, the woods fell silent. The air crackled with a raw power that stole the air from her lungs. The Alpha King had come, and he was hunting for the one she sheltered. His own brother, the prince, branded a traitor. She was an Omega, he was a king, and she was all that stood between them. The wind screamed around Serayan's small cabin, clawing at its log walls like a furious spirit. Snow didn't fall, it flew sideways, a white fury that erased everything. Paths, rivers, even the memory of sunlight. For 2 endless days, the storm had buried the world in silence. To Serayan, this wasn't a prison, it was sanctuary. The storm was her shield. Beyond these woods lay only danger alphas, whose commands could bend her will, betas, who saw her as property, and packs that demanded submission. Here she owed allegiance to no one but the seasons. She was a healer, her life woven from herbs and balms, her hands steady from years of tending broken bones and wounded creatures. Her scent, that soft, damning perfume of an Omega, stayed faint, muted beneath pine and earth. For that she was grateful. It kept her hidden. It kept her free. On the 3rd night, only the crackle of her hearth fire broke the storm's roar. She was grinding willow bark for medicine when a sound tore through the wind, sharp, haunting. Not the creak of trees, nor the howl of the gale, but the agonized cry of an animal. Low and desperate, cut off mid-scream. Her blood turned to ice. No wolf she knew would be caught in such a storm. They were too wise, too instinctive. This was something else, something dying. Every instinct begged her to stay inside, bolt the door, and feed another log to the fire. An Omega did not seek trouble, especially the kind that bled and had fangs. Yet the sound came again, weaker, fading, and it tore at her healer's heart. Cursing her own mercy, Serayan pulled on her fur-lined cloak, wrapped her face in wool, and grabbed the lantern. The moment she opened the door, the storm struck her full force, tearing warmth from her body, stealing breath from her lungs. Snow bit at her skin. Wind howled like a living beast. She pressed forward, boots sinking deep into the drifts, following the faint memory of that cry. The world was chaos, white and gray, shifting, roaring. Then she saw it, a massive dark shape half buried in snow, not 20 paces from her door. A wolf larger than any she had ever seen. Its fur, black as a moonless night, clung to blood and frost. A jagged gash split its flank, open, raw and cruel. Each breath that left its chest was shallow, a ghostly wisp in the frigid air. Its head rested in the snow, eyes closed as if surrendering to death. Fear warred with pity inside her chest. This was no ordinary predator. This was power brought low, an alpha, perhaps even a rogue. Bringing him inside would be madness. Her scent, faint as it was, would be unmistakable to him up close. An Omega and a strange alpha trapped in a storm, it was a recipe for disaster. But as she looked down at his still form, the flicker of her lantern painting him in fragile gold, she saw not danger, only a dying creature. She couldn't leave him. Her soul refused it. The struggle was brutal. He was heavy muscle bone and blood. Her arms trembled as she dragged him inch by inch through the snow, the wind pushing her back, the cold burning her lungs. By the time she reached her cabin, she was drenched in sweat despite the freezing air. With one final heave, she hauled the beast over the threshold and slammed the door shut against the blizzard. The wolf collapsed onto her rug, a broken shadow bathed in firelight. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, a far more dangerous storm began to stir. Serayan peeled off her soaked cloak, her heart pounding. She looked at the massive predator bleeding out on her floor and whispered to no one, "Hold on." I won't let you die." For the rest of that brutal night and through the long gray day that followed, Sirain never stopped, while the storm outside roared like a beast unleashed. Her world shrank to the flickering breath of life stretched across her cabin floor. She cut away the blood-crusted fur around the wolf's flank, and the wound beneath was worse than she feared, deep torn already, sour with infection. Her fingers worked fast but steady, cleaning it with hot saline, biting back the sting of cold as she pressed the cloth to his torn flesh. He didn't move, didn't flinch. He wasn't even here, not really. She crushed her most potent herbs into a thick, pungent poultice yarrow to stop the bleeding comfrey, to draw the flesh together, and a rare silver moss that fought decay like fire in the veins. As she pressed the healing paste into the gash, she whispered to him not words meant for wolves or warriors, but for the broken things of the world, like a bird with a snapped wing or a fawn too young to stand. Then she wrapped his torso in the strips of clean linen. The white bandages looked like snow slashed across the night dark of his fur. He was massive, his paws as large as her hands, his frame carved in power, even as he lay unconscious. She could feel it in him, the force of something ancient and dangerous barely held in sleep. She had to fight the deep-bred instinct inside her, the Omega instinct that told her to submit before something so male, so dominant. But she reminded herself she was a healer, not prey. When it was done, she sank into her chair by the fire, breathless. She studied him now for the first time truly, looking not at his wounds, but at what he was beneath them. He was beautiful, a warrior, and someone had tried to destroy him. But who, what wolves like him, didn't lose fights unless they were betrayed? By the second morning, the storm relented, leaving a world carved from silence and snow. The sun was little more than a ghost behind pale skies. Inside the still cabin, something shifted. A groan, low and ragged, broke the silence. The wolf's body began to convulse. A wave of heat burst from him, rolling off his skin like fire in the winter air. Sirain's heart slammed against her ribs. She knew. Of course she knew. No creature of his size and presence was just a beast. But to feel it, the raw, shifting magic of a born alpha, filling her tiny sanctuary, was another thing entirely. Cracks echoed through the room, wet snapping unnatural. Fur withdrew, bones twisted and stretched. The black muzzle gave way to a human mouth. Limbs straightened. Shoulders widened. In a breathless minute, the wolf was gone. In his place, wrapped in bloodied linen, and nothing else, lay a man. He was naked, his body a map of scars and muscle, every inch telling a story of survival and pain. Old wounds streaked pale across his chest and arms, but it was his face that froze her, strong jaw darkened by stubble, straight nose, high cheekbones framed by tangled black hair falling over a broad brow. Even unconscious, he looked like a fallen king, a strange mix of brutal and noble forged in fire and memory. Suddenly, her cabin felt far too small, too close, too alive. Sirain grabbed a spare blanket, breath shaky, and draped it gently over him. Her fingers brushed his fever-hot skin. The infection had taken hold. Another day, another night. She stayed at his side. She coaxed bitter tea and broth past his cracked lips, changed his bandages, cleaned the angry wound again and again. He burned under the fever, thrashed in his sleep, muttering broken words. Names. Please. Curses in a voice she didn't know. Once his eyes snapped open, wild and empty, and he grabbed her wrist iron strong. Don't let him find me. Then he collapsed again, gone before she could speak. On the third day since she'd pulled him from the storm, the fever broke. Sirain was wiping his brow when his eyes fluttered open, clear this time. They were gray. Not dull, not soft. Storm gray, piercing, sharp. He groaned as he tried to sit up, pain tightening his features. Easy, she said, voice gentle. You're safe here. Don't move. He didn't listen. He pushed up on one elbow, gaze sweeping the room, her herbs, her shelf, her hearth, assessing everything. He looked like a trapped beast searching for exits. Then his eyes landed on her. "Who are you?" he asked, voice gravel low. "Sirayan," she replied, kneeling beside him. "I found you in the snow. You were a wolf." He blinked, looked down at his wrapped side, then at his human hands. Confusion darkened his features. He raised one hand, slowly touching his temple. "I don't remember. The fight. The storm." Sirayan leaned in, her voice soft as snow. "It's all right. One piece at a time." He shook his head. Storm-gray eyes fogged with confusion. "Nothing," he said, voice hoarse. "I don't know my name. I don't know how I got here. I don't even know who I am." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, laced with the quiet terror of someone realizing their identity had been stolen by something they couldn't remember. Sirayan's heart clenched. Whatever he'd endured out there in the snow had shattered his mind as much as his body. "It's okay," she said softly, her healer's instinct kicking in without thought. "Memories come back, but right now, what you need most is rest." He stared at her, torn between suspicion and exhaustion. He was too weak to challenge her, too hurt to fight. He was lying in a stranger's home in the care of a woman he couldn't place. Still, something in her presence calmed him. "Do I have a name?" he asked, like a child reaching for something he didn't know how to name. Sirayan hesitated. "Not one I know," she murmured. Her gaze lingered on him, this dark, quiet force tangled in bandages and bruises. The name came to her like a whisper, not her own. "I'll call you Rion. Until you remember who you really are." He nodded slowly, tasting the name in silence. Rion. He laid his head back down, but his eyes didn't leave her. That gaze, sharp, despite his weariness, held the unspoken truth between them. He owed her his life, and she had willingly become his keeper. Over the next 3 days, a strange stillness settled over the snow-shrouded cabin. Outside, the blizzard had left the world buried and silent, a white sea with no shore. Inside, quiet routines bloomed like frost-kissed flowers. Sirayan taught Rion how to tend his wound, though she still inspected it herself each morning and night. The healing was swift unnaturally, so a sign of his shifter blood working overtime. He rarely spoke of his past. There was nothing to say. His mind was a blank slate, and that absence haunted him. So he watched. He watched her grind herbs with precise hands. He watched her build the fire, her face flickering in the gold glow. He watched her knead dough flour, dusting her arms like snow. He was learning her. The rhythm of her days, the silent wisdom of how she moved through this place. And slowly Sirayan let her guard down. His presence filled the cabin, not just with the imposing energy of an alpha, but with something deeper. Something protective. When a floorboard creaked, his head would snap up, body tense, eyes scanning. He was still wounded, still lost, but the warrior inside him hadn't gone anywhere. They shared meals, rabbit stew and rustic bread, eaten in companionable silence. Sometimes she read aloud from her worn book of herbal lore, and he'd listen, his gaze distant, as if a forgotten word might unlock the door to his memory. And with each passing hour, something fragile and unspoken knit itself between them. She was an Omega who'd never known the safety of a pack. He was an Alpha of that, she had no doubt, now not with his scent and the quiet way he took up space, but an Alpha with no past. They were two broken pieces fitting together by accident or fate, but peace never lingers long. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, something shifted. It began as a chill crawling up Sirayan's spine, a sense of dread that had nothing to do with snow. The air grew thick, pressing in around her. Rion felt it too. He sat up from the cot. Every muscle drawn tight, his head cocked toward the door. "What is it?" she whispered. "I don't know," he muttered, one hand moving instinctively, to the bandaged gash at his side. But it's strong. Power. A lot of it. Then came the silence. Outside, the forest stopped breathing. No birds. No wind. No sound. The kind of stillness that falls before the world breaks. Then it hit an overwhelming wave of alpha dominance. Sirayan gasped. It wasn't just pressure, it was suffocation. A psychic weight crashing into her body, demanding surrender. Her knees buckled. Every part of her screamed to fall, to bare her throat, to yield. Her hands clenched the edge of the table, knuckles pale. Across the room, Rion rose unsteady but alert. A growl built low in his chest, primal and deep. He stepped in front of her, still wounded, but unflinching. "Stay behind me," he growled. And then the door didn't creak or crack. It was ripped clean from its hinges like it was made of paper. It was torn clean from its hinges and flung into the snowbank like it weighed nothing at all. And in its place, framed in a blinding curtain of white, stood a figure that made the very air inside the cabin go still. He was tall, too tall to be anything but power incarnate, wrapped in black furs that shimmered like they devoured the light. His hair was gold, not the soft kind, but sharp like fire under sunlight. His face looked carved from marble, aristocratic, flawless, but it was his eyes that froze the blood in Sirayan's veins. Eyes of molten gold, alive with arrogance, the gaze of someone who had never been denied a single thing in his life. This was no Alpha. This was Valric, the Alpha King, and he had found them. Behind him, standing in a perfect semicircle like a line of executioners, were a dozen grim, disciplined warriors in human form, the Black Fangs. Elite, loyal, silent as death. Valric's eyes swept the room like it disgusted him, the herbs, the worn furniture, the low fire. Then he saw Rion, and his lips curved into a smile that cut deeper than any blade. "Well, well," he purred, voice like a velvet threat. "The rumors of your death seem to have been disappointingly false." "Brother." The word shattered something inside Rion. It echoed into the void of his broken memory and found no anchor. But something beneath his skin flared to life, a hatred, ancient and unexplainable. Valric's gaze slid from Rion to Sirayan, still fighting to stand under the sheer weight of his dominance. His eyes lingered on her throat. Something cold and predatory sparked in them. "And what do we have here?" he murmured, stepping fully into the room, dragging the storm behind him. "A little Omega stray. Harboring a traitor. This day just keeps getting better." He was here. The world she'd spent years hiding from had kicked down her door, and it wore a crown. Valric moved deeper into the cabin, with the fluid confidence of a predator. The Black Fangs didn't follow. They didn't need to. Their very stillness was a threat. His eyes never left Rion. The performance began a show of grief and fury, dancing across his perfect features. "Cassian," he said, spitting the name like a curse. "Do you have any idea the chaos you caused? The grief? We mourned you." He paused. "I mourned you." Rion blinked. The name meant nothing, yet Valric spoke it like gospel. He felt like a pawn in someone else's game, a game he didn't know he'd been playing. Still, he stepped forward, placing himself between Sirayan and the storm in human form. "I don't know who you are," he growled. Valric's laugh was cold sharp. "Oh, then, the blow to your head must have been worse than I thought. Let me remind you." He began to circle them, his heavy cloak brushing the wooden floor like the hiss of something coiled. "You are Prince Cassian of Obsidian Crest, my brother, the traitor who tried to kill our father and steal my throne." Each word slammed into Sirayan like a hammer. She stared at Rion, this man she'd fed and healed and trusted. A prince, a traitor. It didn't fit. Nothing about the quiet man who listened to her read old herbals felt like a monster. Valric's voice dripped false sympathy. "You vanished after your little coup failed. We assumed the mountain took you a coward's end for a coward's crime. But no, you survived. And now you're hiding in a cabin with this thing. His gaze raked over Serain again, this time with cruel dismissal. But she could feel it, the lie beneath his words. It was subtle, but it was there, like oil slick beneath still water. Rion's fists clenched at his sides. He didn't remember what Valric claimed. But every fiber of his soul rejected it. The story didn't fit the hollow shape inside him. Didn't fit the pain. Didn't fit the ache that flared when he thought of the word father. He died thinking you betrayed him, Valric said, voice dropping to something almost mournful. I had to take the crown before our kingdom crumbled. He stepped closer. And I've hunted every conspirator since. Now I've found the last. He stood before them now, his presence a pressure, his words a blade. Your game is over. You'll be dragged back to the capital and tried in front of the pack, then executed. Serain's breath caught. Executed. They were going to kill him. And you, Valric, turned to her, the full force of his golden gaze pinning her. He saw her fear. He saw her defiance. And he saw the way she refused to move from Rion's side. Aiding a traitor to the throne is treason, little Omega. And in that moment, she knew Valric hadn't come just to reclaim his brother. He'd come to destroy them both. You will tell me everything. How long has he been here? Who sent him? What does he want? The words rolled off Valric's tongue like silk wrapped around a knife. This was it. The moment Serain had feared her entire life and Alpha's command. She braced herself, for her mind to be seized, for her voice to no longer be hers, for her thoughts to become nothing but obedience. Then it hit, a focused, brutal wave of psychic pressure, a force meant to break her, meant to shatter her will and bury her under a single overwhelming impulse. Obey. Pain lanced through her skull. Her stomach churned. Black spots pulsed at the edges of her vision. But her mind stayed whole. The command was loud, yes, but distant, like a shout muffled behind a wall of thick glass. She felt it. She heard its echo, but it could not reach her. Her thoughts stayed her own, her memories, her secrets, her soul, untouched, unbroken. Valric's perfect expression cracked barely, but unmistakably. His voice had held the weight of a king, the strength to compel armies. Yet this lone Omega, fragile in body, had not yielded. She stared back at him, chest rising with effort, her eyes wide. Yes, but defiant. Unyielding. He stepped closer, power pulsing off him like fire off the sun. The air turned electric, the room too tight to hold the force he brought with him. I said, he growled low and lethal, tell me everything. The pressure surged. A second tidal wave of dominance crashed against her. Behind her eyes, pain bloomed like an explosion. Her body trembled. Her knees buckled. Still the glass wall held. She bit the inside of her cheek, copper on her tongue. She would not speak. She would not betray Rion. Silence. Only the fire crackled. Valric inhaled softly, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Not fury this time, fascination. Something hungry and wicked sparked behind his golden gaze. The hunt for his brother vanished from his mind. Now he only saw her. Incredible, he murmured. A real smile touched his lips, but it was cold as the snowstorm outside. Absolutely incredible. You're not just an Omega, are you? His tone shifted collector's awe, not a king's wrath. You're a null, a shielded Omega. His gaze shimmered with possessiveness. You were supposed to be a myth. He reached out, hand stopping just inches from her cheek, his fingers trembling like he was inches away from a relic of impossible worth. My dear, he whispered, my brother is no longer the most interesting thing in this room. You are. The words curled like smoke in the air. A null Omega. Even Serain didn't fully understand what it meant. Only that since she was a child, commands that bent others had never truly touched her. They pressed but never pierced. She'd thought others were weak, not that she was different. But she had learned fast different meant hunted. And so she had hidden. Now the most dangerous alpha in the land had seen through her shield, and named her what she feared the most, a prize. Rion stared at her, something clicking into place behind his storm-gray eyes. Her solitude, her strength, her survival. All of it now made sense, and now she was in greater danger than ever. Valric's entire mask fell away. No more sorrow, no more nobility. Now he was only conqueror. His brother was a nuisance to be erased. But Sirene, she was a weapon, a defiance to the natural order. And breaking her would prove that even free will could be crushed beneath his rule. Forget the traitor, Valric said, his voice dipping to a husky murmur meant only for her. You little healer are far more intriguing. A will that cannot bend. Imagine what that would feel like, if it belonged to me. He stepped forward again, closing the distance. Sirene flinched, but before Valric could move closer, Rion was there. Like stone. Like fire. Do not touch her, Rion growled voice, rough but filled with something unshakable. Not fear, not memory, but truth. Alpha. Valric tilted his head, unimpressed. You're in no place to make demands, little brother. You're already condemned. His golden eyes flicked back to Sirene. She, on the other hand, has a choice. His voice dropped to something silken and vile. She can swear fealty to her king. And I may be generous. I may even offer her a place beside me, in my court. A pretty unique pet. The word landed like a slap. Pet, not a companion, not a healer, not even a person. Just something to be owned. The insult was deliberate, and it burned. Sirene felt the cold fury rise in her chest, cutting through the fear that had kept her rooted for too long. She had spent her whole life running from cages. Now this king dared to offer her a golden one. I'm no one's pet, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Valric's smile widened, predator meeting challenge. He liked the fire in her, liked the idea of watching it dim. No, he murmured. We'll see. He lifted a hand not to strike but to signal. Seize the traitor, he commanded. Don't kill him. I want the people to see him beg, and secure the Omega, carefully. I want her spirit unbroken when I crush it myself. Two black fangs stepped through the threshold mountains of men, all sharp jawlines and dead eyes. Veterans. Loyal. Lethal. Rion shoved Sirene behind him, his stance wide, his teeth bared, wounded, outnumbered. But he stood like a wall. He would die before he let them take her. And that was the moment Sirene snapped back to life. She'd lived like a shadow, hiding, surviving, never fighting. But nursing Rion back from the edge had changed something. He treated her like a person, not a possession. Like she mattered. And she'd be damned if she let Valric tear that away. Her eyes darted across her small cabin, not as home but now as battleground. The kettle of boiling water, the shelves lined with jars, the iron poker by the hearth. Not much, but maybe enough. As the first guard lunged, something inside Rion cracked open. A flash of memory, vivid, sharp, brutal, ripped through his mind. Valric's face twisted in rage, the stench of blood magic. His own brother's claws tearing into him. The feel of falling betrayed, broken, thrown from a cliff into a storm. You. Rion rasped, horror and truth surging together. You tried to kill me. The words dropped into the room like thunder. Valric didn't blink, but something cold lit in his eyes. He had been so close. Enough, he barked. Take them now. But in that breath of hesitation, Sirene moved. She spun, seized the glowing iron poker, and didn't aim it at the guards. She struck the shelves. Glass shattered. Herbs and powders exploded across the room. A cloud of pungent smoke, sharp, acrid, dizzying, filled the air. Mint, wolfsbane, burdock, lavender, bloodroot. A dozen clashing scents turned the cabin into a sensory nightmare. For shifters, scent was everything. Now it was their weakness. The guards staggered confused, blinking through the haze. Sirain grabbed the kettle from its hook. Rion back wall. He didn't hesitate. As she hurled scalding water in a wide arc, eliciting howls of pain, Rion shifted. In a flash of cracking bone and snapping limbs, the man was gone. In his place stood a colossal black wolf, his gray eyes alight with fury and clarity. He didn't go for the door. He turned and charged the back wall. The old logs splintered. With a deafening crash, Rion burst through into the snow-covered wild. He turned back just long enough, looking for her. Valric, still recovering from the chaos, roared, "After them, I want him dead or alive." But Sirain was already moving. As the guard staggered in the mist and dodged boiling water, she dove through the gap Rion had made. The cold slammed into her like a fist. But she didn't care. Rion was waiting, a dark shadow in the snow. He nudged her forward with his massive head. "Run. Now." Together, they fled into the trees. The snow was deep, but the forest gave them cover. Behind them, shouts rose. Footsteps pounded. The king's wolves were coming, but so were her instincts. She would not run anymore. She would survive and fight. They ran through the snow, driven by sheer desperation. Sirain's lungs burned her legs, screamed with every step through waist-deep drifts. Rion, in his wolf form, moved like a shadow, bounding ahead to cut a path, then circling back, refusing to let her fall behind. His presence was her anchor, her shield, her fire against the cold dread biting at her heels. And somewhere inside him, the dam had broken. More memories surged back, jagged, violent fragments twisting into truth. "He killed our father." The words slammed into her thoughts, not spoken, but shared in a raw, primal mind link between them. He used blood magic, made a pact with the Ashvale clan, hid his scent, made it look like rogues. I found out. I confronted him. That's when he tried to end me. Not just a tyrant. Valric was a traitor to the bloodline, a murderer of their father, a usurper who painted his own brother as the villain to seize the crown. They ran for what felt like forever, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them, swallowed by the hush of the snow-laced forest. At last Sirain stumbled, her body spent, falling into a drift of powder. Rion was beside her in a heartbeat, shifting mid-motion. The cold slapped at his bare skin, but he didn't care. She was the only thing that mattered. He dropped to his knees and pulled her into his arms. She trembled not from the cold, but from the weight of it all. "Sirain." He breathed her name like a vow. His voice was hoarse but real, full of gratitude, of awe. "You saved me. You saved." She buried her face against his chest. "You would have done the same," she whispered. He held her tighter. "No," he said, eyes flicking toward the trees. "Valric won't stop. Not now. Not after what he saw in you." And she knew. The life she'd clung to, quiet, hidden, untouched, it was gone. But she didn't feel shattered. Not anymore. Because when she looked at Rion, she no longer saw the wounded stranger. She saw a prince reborn. And somewhere inside her, something new sparked to life. Not fear, resolve. "Then we don't let him find us," she said, her voice steel. "Where do we go?" Rion looked north, where the jagged frost-fanged mountains cut into the sky. "To our father's allies," he said. "Stormvale. If I can prove Valric's betrayal, we might stand a chance." She nodded. "I'm not afraid of dangerous," she whispered. And it was true. She wasn't. Not anymore. They were no longer a healer and her patient. They were a rebellion. Two souls against a kingdom built on lies. As the stars blinked into the frozen sky, they turned toward the unknown, past, buried future unwritten. And together they ran. The journey north tested everything they had. The wilderness was cruel, vast, indifferent. It hid them, but it also tried to kill them. They moved by night, the moon their compass. By day they slept in caves, hollows, the roots of ancient trees. Siren's knowledge became their lifeline. She knew which plants they could eat, which bark soothed infection, how to watch the clouds for snow and danger. She wasn't just a healer anymore. She was a survivor. Rion protected them. Each day his strength returned. He hunted in his wolf form, fast and merciless. In human form, he was her warmth in the bitter dark, his arms always open, always steady. The fire between them, deep and forged by cold nights and shared breath. They spoke in whispers, stories, whispered into the frozen dark. He told her about life in Obsidian Crest, about his love for Eldrin, about the creeping rot he'd sensed in Valric for years. He spoke of the sigils, the blood-stained symbols hidden in the king's chambers, the final proof, the final betrayal. And Rion, who had once woken, lost and nameless, was now a prince, driven by fire and vengeance. Siren told him of her years alone, of hiding, of never fitting, of her gift, her curse, the thing that made her untouchable. With him, for the first time, she wasn't a freak. She wasn't broken. He looked at her with something his brother never could: respect, reverence, wonder. Your immunity. It's not just a shield, Rion said one night, their faces lit by the soft green shimmer of the northern lights. It's a weapon. He looked at her like he saw the future. Valric's power comes from command, from control. You are the one soul in this world he cannot break. That makes you more powerful than you know. One evening, they stumbled upon the crumbling remains of an old messenger station, stone walls, half swallowed by forest and snow. Built long ago by the first kings of the north, it had once given shelter to those crossing treacherous lands. Now it became theirs. Inside they found respite from a rising snowstorm. With some effort, Siren coaxed a low, smokeless fire to life in the ancient hearth, the warm glow casting flickering shadows on the moss-covered stone. Rion sat across from her, firelight painting the hard edges of his face in amber and shadow. Exhaustion lined both their features, but beneath it, something deeper pulsed. It was in the way his fingers always found hers without looking, the way her breath caught whenever his storm-gray eyes lingered too long. Siren, he said, his voice rough and soft all at once. When I was in your cabin, with no name, no past, all I knew was that I felt peace when you were near. He reached out, gently brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her skin tingled from his touch. Your scent. It calmed something raging inside me. I thought it was gratitude, but it's more. A sad smile ghosted across his lips. The fates have a twisted sense of humor. To lose everything, only to be led to you. He paused, then let the word hang between them. Mate. It struck like a thunderclap. Sacred, heavy, real. Every shifter knew what it meant. The other half of your soul. For Siren, it was a fairy tale, something she'd never dared to want. I'm just an Omega, she whispered, old fears rising like ghosts. You're a prince. You need someone powerful. A lunar, not a forest-worn healer like me. Rion shook his head, voice sharp with truth. I don't need status. I don't need crowns. I need you. Your strength. It's not in title. It's in your heart. You stood between me and a king. You defied power most would crumble under. He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. I won't force a bond, he murmured. Not while we're running. Not while you're unsure. But whatever comes, whatever lies ahead, my heart belongs to you. I'll reclaim my kingdom. Not just for my father, but for us. For the future you gave me. Tears welled in Siren's eyes, but they weren't born of sorrow. They were hope. Because in the ruins of a forgotten world, surrounded by snow and hunted by tyranny, she had found something she'd never known, Home. And it wasn't a place. It was a person. She lifted her head and kissed him. It was gentle at first, a question, then deeper, full of desperation and promise. It was a vow forged in frost and fire. They weren't just running anymore. They were choosing each other, choosing to fight. The storm still waited. Valric still hunted. The Frostfang Mountains loomed. But in that moment, by the warmth of a fading flame, they weren't fugitives. They were the Omega who could not be broken, and the prince who would take back his crown. Dawn broke cold and gray across the broken stone walls. The fire had long since gone out, but Serayan still lay tucked against Rion. Her body curled against his for warmth. He was already awake, staring at the ruined ceiling, mind turning toward the mountains. "Good morning, my prince," she whispered, the title unfamiliar but true. He turned, his lips curving gently. "Good morning, my healer." He brushed a thumb across her cheek. "I wish I could give you a warm bed, a real breakfast, a fire that lasts longer than a few hours." "Shh," she said, pressing a finger to his lips. "We have this. We have today." They rose, sore cold but moving forward. As Serayan packed their meager supplies, she looked up. "You said we're heading to Stormvale. Who leads them now?" Rion stood tall, his frame stronger, steadier than ever. The last of his weakness burned away by truth and the chase. "Kaynor. A hard man, but loyal, just. He was my father's closest friend, bound to him by blood and honor. If anyone will believe me, if anyone will take a stand against Valric, it's Kaynor." He glanced toward the jagged peaks slicing across the sky, a wall of ice and stone, unforgiving, unyielding, but so were they now. And together they stepped toward it, toward rebellion, toward reckoning, toward a kingdom waiting to be reclaimed. Reaching him will be the hardest part. Rion's warning echoed in Serayan's mind like a prophecy. The Frostfangs didn't just test the body, they devoured it. Within the hour, the mountain ascent began. What lay ahead wasn't a climb. It was a trial by ice and pain, a war between will and nature. The foothills had been rough. The mountains were merciless. Narrow paths slick with invisible ice twisted like veins across cliffs. Snow clung to ledges, hiding deadly drops beneath a thin white mask. And the wind screamed. It didn't howl like the forest. It roared like a beast made of ice and spite, slashing at exposed skin, threatening to hurl them into the abyss. This was no longer the world Serayan knew. The forest had given. The mountain only took. Her lungs, used to the thick air of the valley, now strained for every breath in the thin, brittle atmosphere. Her legs trembled with effort, every step an agony. After hours of clawing upward, she stumbled against a sheer rock face and gasped, "I need a moment." She dropped, panting, her hands numb inside soaked gloves. Rion was at her side instantly, his face tight with concern. "You're freezing." He grabbed her hands, rubbing warmth into them with his own rough palms. "We can't stop here. It's too exposed." Without hesitation, he shifted. Bones snapped, muscles stretched, and the great black wolf stood before her, bold against the white void. He pressed his warm body to her side, nudging her with silent urgency. "Hold on to me," his voice whispered inside her mind. She gripped his fur tightly, one hand braced against his shoulder, and together they moved half-human, half-beast, across a path barely wide enough for survival. He was her balance, her strength, her fire against the cold. Hours passed. Finally, they found a shallow overhang, barely enough to be called shelter, but enough to block the wind. Rion shifted back, shivering violently, as the cold hit his bare skin. Serayan didn't hesitate. She saw the pale color on his fingertips, the stiffness in his ears, early frost nip. "Sit," she ordered, her healer's voice returning like a blade, honed by instinct. She dug into her pack, pulled out a tin of balm, rendered fat arnica and mountain herbs. She rubbed it hard into his skin, forcing warmth and blood to return. "You can't be reckless," she muttered, focused. "Even you aren't invincible out here." He watched her quietly, then murmured, "You're incredible, Serene. You've spent your life hiding, but you're the bravest soul I've ever known." Her hands stilled. "I wasn't brave," she whispered. "I was surviving." Then she looked up at him, eyes fierce. "But you taught me how to fight." A sudden whistle cut through the wind, not natural. Rion's instincts kicked in. He pulled her deeper into the overhang, one hand over her mouth, his eyes scanning the horizon. "What is it?" she breathed. He pointed not behind them, but east. A faint column of smoke rose in the valley below. Thin, controlled, not wild, not accidental. A camp. Blackfang's Rion growled. "They're not just following us. Valric knows we're heading to Stormvale. He's cutting us off at the pass." Serene's blood turned to ice. They weren't just outrunning snow anymore. They were caught in a trap. One party below, another behind. The mountain had become their only lifeline. "They'll move faster than us," she said, dread creeping in. Maybe Rion replied, lifting her to her feet. His eyes were sharp as the wind, cold as steel. "But they don't have you." He looked toward the steep, dangerous ascent above them. "We go high. We take the path they won't expect. Let them have the easy road. We carve our own." And so it begins, the real journey of Surayen and Rion. They've found each other. But will they find the allies they need to challenge a throne built on blood and lies? Valric will stop at nothing to take back what he believes is his brother's head. And the Omega who defied him. Will the proud northern packs trust the word of a fugitive prince? Will they choose truth over fear? Will they believe a rebellion born in fire and snow? The battle for Obsidian Crest is more than a fight for land. It's a war for the soul of the shifter world. If you were moved by Serene's quiet strength and Rion's unshakable resolve, hit that like button and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe they'll reach Stormvale in time? Do you want to witness the storm collide with the Tyrant King? Share this story with a friend who loves tales of fated love wolves and rebellion. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss part 2 of their incredible saga. Thank you for joining the pack. The rebellion is only just beginning.